Hello students, welcome to our channel IASPrimers, and as always we are referring to the Hindu newspapers Delhi edition. So we have an ad, one full page ad over here. In fact, I am also launching my own course. I'm working on that actually. So known as the QRS. So this is aimed and targeted at repeat students. So who want to refer those content, Tamil Nadu NCR, Tamil Nadu board book. You want to complete the physical geography. Somewhere the content issue was there, you were there in your coaching. So I'm doing that. Actually, I'm working on this. So I'm working on ancient and medieval Tamil Nadu board, and simultaneously I am preparing lectures on physical geography, fundamentals of physical geography, and like that I'll continue to do so. Alongside, there will be MCQs and mains-based questions as the chapter progresses. So if you're interested, anybody, just let me know. I'll take about 7 to 8 days to make it live. So once these two are done, and I'll keep doing more and more. Okay. So first we have Jharkhand MLAs fly to Raipur. Right. So again, we have the issue of defection coming up. And I told you, it's always best to prepare a note. Once you prepare a note, same things keep repeating. So current affairs is actually static. Once this clarity is there, you can actually do smart work. Current affairs is static. So defection related committees, what were the guidelines, what are the issues concerning it? All that, same thing repeats itself. History repeats itself. Okay. Yeah, some more news over here. Supreme Court impledes NHRC, National Commission for Women, in personal law case. Fine. So what does impledes mean? In this context, it means that Supreme Court is hearing a case to do with personal law. We'll come to that. And in this, NHRC and National Commission for Women have been made parties. So they'll be participating. And what is this issue? So this is concerning the Muslim personal law. Basically, there is a practice of polygamy and nikah halala, which polygamy, I think we know a person can marry multiple times, multiple women. So I'm having more than one wife, polygamy. And what is nikah halala? So here it mentions. So nikah halala basically means, let's say a person marries his wife, right? So A is and they have a talaq, they have a divorce. Now tomorrow they cannot remarry. If they want to remarry and get them normalize their marriage, then the wife, the wife will have to have another marriage with a different man. So this woman would have to marry a different person. And then again, the talaq should take place, and then she can marry this person again. So this is nikah halala. Okay, so Mr. Upadhyay has went to the court and he says that this is violative of fundamental rights, namely Article 14, 15, and 21. So Article 14, equality before law. Article 15, prohibition of discrimination. So discrimination shall not be done. Article 21, right to live with dignity. Right. So obviously all three you can see it. So this is like polygamy, and condition of nikah halala is only for Muslim women. So this is violative of Article 14, as law is different for different persons. Okay. There is discrimination taking place on the grounds of religion. So Article 15, and this is not dignity. So Article 21. Okay, so they have gone to this, and it is with reference to the Muslim personal law. I hope this thing is clear. We are not going in detail, but yeah, this thing is clear. Now, besides this, when we are talking about this, naturally it triggers a debate on the uniform civil code, having a uniform civil code for the population of a country. So obviously we all, I have Sikh personal law, Islamic personal law, whichever community we belong to, there are personal laws associated with that. So why not have a common set of personal laws, or at least things like divorce, inheritance of property? So that should be equal for every individual in the country. So that is Uniform Civil Code. Fine. So uniform, it's uniform for across the population. Okay, besides, I think we can also look at it NHRC. We can revise NHRC from the polity, right? So what all NHRC does from mains perspective and analysis, or basically an evaluation of the performance of the NHRC and the National Commission for Women. In fact, this topic has been asked in the mains quite recently. So quite recently this has been asked. And both these agencies, I hope you know, these are statutory bodies. And why? Because they are created by a statute or a law created by the parliament. Okay, let's move downwards. This road turns lake, you can see this. In fact, my place is known as Kanalpur. So when the rains take place, it becomes something like this. Okay, so we have a flooded road, and naturally we are talking about urban floods. We have a video on this. I think that would work well for you. Like defection, you know, we prepare a topic once and that is done for once and for all. So like that, there is a video on urban floods also. We can apply it in whatever context with the reports, recommendations, facts, everything is given in that. Okay, so let's move forward. Telangana tops inflation charts at 8.3%. Okay, I hope you know what is inflation, right? So inflation, you know, increase in price rise, and that is not common across the country. In some states, some things will be more expensive as compared to the other. So that takes place. For example, food may be more expensive. Okay. Besides this, rural and urban inflation may be different. Now, when we talk about this inflation, I mean, first of all, this article is basically talking about inflation state-wise. And when we're talking about inflation, which the people face, people experience, so that is known as retail inflation, which is denoted by CPI. Right, so it is denoted by the CPI. Okay. Now there is another reference of another term over here known as the headline inflation. So what is headline inflation? And another term associated with inflation is core inflation. So this I feel is important from the pre-perspective. So headline inflation, basically any inflation, when they say the CPI is at 8%, the CPI is at 6%, 7%, that is actually headline inflation. Core inflation is when I feel that, okay, fine, we know that food is going to get more expensive. Food is highly volatile. The supply, if the supply of food gets affected, so the food will get more expensive. And with the changing season, the food prices will come down. So food, for example, or energy, fuel prices, they are very, very volatile. So for a policymaker, you know, it doesn't give a good indication if we start talking about inflation from the point of view of food or fuel. Basically, those sectors which are very, very volatile, whose price goes up and down. So they take into account, they remove these things like food, energy, basically anything that is volatile. And when we remove that, it is known as the core inflation. So headline inflation is something like this, all the things covered, and core inflation is something like this. Okay, so core inflation is the change in cost of goods and services, but does not include those from the food and energy sectors. So basically the volatile things are taken out of this thing. And headline inflation is total inflation in the economy. Fine, so this includes the volatile items also. Okay, so let's move forward. Delhi police first forced to make forensic probe mandatory. Right, forensics. What is forensics? Did you see the CID on the Sony TV? Only CID used to come at one point of time, and right? So CID, they will they will take the hair or whatever things are there, and then they will analyze and try to identify who the criminal is, when the death took place, and all those things. So that is basically forensic probe. Also, that thing CID was very, very high tech. Okay. So this is going to be mandatory, and Delhi police is the first force to do this. By the way, the police thing, the law and order is actually a state domain, so naturally it depends on the governments, respective governments, what they do with it. It is not for the union to really decide this. Okay, so what will happen with this if forensic probe is made mandatory? In our country, police, when they have to investigate, they resort to custodial torture. They beat up so that people, out of fear, they reveal information or they confess. So custodial torture takes place. So one reason for this custodial torture to take place and custodial death to take place is the poor quality of investigation, the poor training of the police in investigative techniques. So if investigative techniques are good, so they may not have to resort to this custodial torture. So this thing will improve as a result of this, right? So that's the main reason. And plus, obviously, it will also lead to better closure of cases. It will lead to better convictions, right? So because of want of evidence, the Supreme Court sometimes says also that we know that this person must have done something, but it has not been proven. So this will result in better convictions. Okay, so that is the whole idea actually. Yeah. Now, what was happening basically? What was the context? Why this thing is there in the news? The Home Minister was presiding over a meeting at the Zonal Council. So, what is a Zonal Council? So, naturally, you can see the police people over here, state officials, the state officials of respective zones, right? So, a country can be divided into multiple zones. So this is an example of cooperative federalism. And by the way, there is something known as zonal councils and there is something known as interstate councils. So zonal councils are basically statutory. It is as a result of a provision of the State Reorganization Act. So these are statutory in nature, while the interstate council has been provided for in the Constitution itself. Fine, so this is what I wanted to basically discuss. Okay, so let's move forward. Yeah. So nothing really in the state section. So let's move forward. And yeah, happy Ganesh Chaturthi to all of you. Okay. Rain wreaks havoc in Bangalore roads. Traffic movement tripled as water from lake overflowed. The same thing, urban floods, what are the reasons, what needs to be done, what needs to be done is basically the recommendations, right? So, yeah. Leopard attacks man at a temple in Andhra Pradesh. Fine. Obviously, UPSC will not ask us this, right? But what UPSC may ask is the rising incidents of man-animal conflict. And what paper will it ask? Most likely in the GS3, as GS3 also encompasses environment part. So GS3. So the man-animal conflict. So naturally, what are the reasons? Do we have facts on this? And what steps are being taken? I think this, if you can prepare and write a note of about 250 words, you'll be safe. Right? From the point of view of mains examination, you should be safe with that. Okay, so I was referring to certain PIBs. So let's have a look at this thing. So one is Mr. Suresh Prabhu's statement. Need to address root cause behind man-animal conflict, right? So in context of a event, he made this statement, and he is talking about reduction in habitat, encroachment of human beings into the habitat of the human beings is increasing, and we are getting more and more near the wildlife as a result of this. And actually, most of our settlements that we live in were earlier forests. So we are actually the ones who are intruding into their environment and not vice versa. Their space is actually coming down. So that is one reason. Okay. Livestock is another reason, cattle, etc. For example, in the Gir, where we have lions, only place where we have lions. So Gir are no Gir Wildlife Sanctuary or National Park. It is the lions tend to attack the livestock and including the leopards also. Right, that is one thing. Then these animals were not designed to be there in a particular national park. Right? There is a tendency amongst them to migrate. They used to migrate long distances from north to south. In fact, early human beings Tamil Nadu NCR, Tamil Nadu boats, early human beings migrated from Africa to India. So there were corridors through which various species keep moving. So these wildlife corridors have been disturbed, and this also results in the wildlife encroaching into the human habitat. We need to scientifically construct the wildlife habitats, wildlife corridors, and these should not be disturbed. Okay, so that is one thing. Then, yeah. So this is the need to address root cause. Then government approves advisory for management of human wildlife conflict across the country. Right. So we have it. Government approves advisory. So what are the recommendations by a committee that is given for dealing with the wildlife conflict? So I'll share it with you on my Telegram. See, during the meeting, the standing committee also recommended the construction of causeway across various areas, so basically wildlife corridors. The other decisions taken at the meeting were construction of a bridge and canal with the aim to augment the water supply and irrigation facilities. Fine. Then it talks about National Board of Wildlife is constituted, right? So we have certain points over here. We have to adapt them for our answer writing actually. Okay. So let's move. Pledges from Red Fort, pledges by every Indian, right? And context of this thing. How should citizens be? Not doing it. Floods and foes, India and Pakistan relationship. And actually, I hope you know this. In Pakistan, there was a flood. Situation is very bad. The Indian side said, "Okay, fine. There was this thing that why not take help of India for food grains, etc." So the Pakistani Prime Minister said that since fine we can take help, but see what is happening in Kashmir when there is genocide taking place in Kashmir. How can we take aid from this country? So that's the kind of statement that he made. Right. So political rhetoric can be seen over here. Besides, we get some fact, right? So we need to normalize this thing. If we want to normalize humanitarian aid is one area where we can work. Basically low-hanging fruits where we can work. So humanitarian aid, the improvements in trade, economic integration can be worked together, and then later we can move towards political resolutions. Now here we get Prime Minister Narendra Modi and their Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif are due to travel to Uzbekistan in September for the SCO, which tomorrow only September starts. Flogging the death, I have not even read this. This is about Jayalalitha's death, right? So this case has come up. So yeah. I have shared this article. This is about drop the phone checking draft surveillance curbing orders. So this is about, this is basically telling the top courts, the Supreme Court basically, to look into the issue of surveillance. We cannot really expect the government to do much about it. So the top court or the Supreme Court intervene into this state surveillance and the privacy that is being compromised. And for this, they should take into consideration the international best practices that are taking place. So I've shared this article on the Telegram. I've highlighted these things, like what all is happening across the world. So let's see. I hope you know this. Surveillance is taking place. Surveillance, the reason for surveillance is basically surveillance means see, hear, right? It's basically spying. spying for the purpose of public safety, so that we can know in advance that, okay, fine, bomb blast is going to take place. These are the terrorists that are coming in. So the law enforcement agencies are well aware, they have the information. Okay. If somebody is trying to engage in rioting, etc., so those people are apprehended before the menace takes place. So this is required for sure. Surveillance is required. But at the same time, it should not be at the cost. Yes, it will compromise privacy, but we need to balance the two over here. Right? We need to balance the two. So here we have some international world countries before India who have looked into this issue and how they are dealing with it. So the New South Wales law, when we use the word Wales, we are basically talking about Great Britain, right? Okay. So established the Office of the Privacy Commissioner with inspectors to investigate complaints with reference to violation of privacy. Okay, so a dedicated body for this purpose can be created. The United Nations contributed to the development of a legal framework involving the no secret rules. So it says that for a government to say that it needed to do surveillance in national interest was not good enough at all. There has to be an objective basis for the same. In fact, in the United States, in fact, even in India actually, but in United States, if a government wants to seek permission for surveillance, then they must approach to the federal court. Their Supreme Court is known as the federal court. So basically, judicial intervention should be there. Okay. You can see my Pegasus video also. So at the end of the video, I have mentioned some of the points. I have also discussed the Puttaswamy judgment. The test given by Puttaswamy judgment with reference to privacy and any intervention when privacy is going to be compromised. Yeah. So the European Court of Human Rights held that secret surveillance can undermine or even destroy democracy under the cloak of defending it. In Indian context also, surveillance was seen to be done on not well-renowned terrorists, but actually judges of the Supreme Court, some of the probable ministers, now who are ministers, so the candidates for becoming ministers, leader of opposition, so opposition members, human rights activists, they were being targeted. Okay. Then we have Venice Commission. So they also advocated an independent control and oversight over obviously the government. Right, so here again, oversight institutions is required. So we can see oversight, the need for an independent agency, oversight body or office of privacy. Okay, in Indian context now, the Indian scene is murky, so Indian scene is not very good. So I had some facts. Naturally, we have the controversy around the Pegasus, so that is one thing. Not much has happened over there. Then we have, there is this not-for-profit organization known as Citizen Lab, a digital surveillance research agency based in Canada. So what it said? It said that they found these blue coat devices are being used around the world. We found these appliances in India, and report also talks about a software known as packet shaper. So what are these blue coat devices? Like, in prelims it can be asked. The term that is often there in news, blue coat devices. It is a option A, B, C, D. Likewise for packet shaper. So blue coat devices, naturally, if it is in this context over here, surveillance, so it is for surveillance. So these are known as dual use technology, basically for corporate, to protect the corporate networks. They are prone to information leaks, etc. So protect them. But it can also be used by the governments to censor and monitor the public internet's traffic. So it can be used as a surveillance defined. It can be used for tracking what all things people are doing, etc. So blue coat devices. Then there is something known as a packet shaper. helps in identifying infected PCs and unsanctioned traffic, as well as protecting performance, right? The software associated with the cyber security. Then there is another software known as Finisher, which has been found on servers, and it is a surveillance software. Human rights, they have found that human rights campaigners in countries have been, in their devices, the FinSpy thing has been installed. Okay, so what should be done? So what should be done with reference to all this? Obviously, we need to have a balanced approach. We cannot say one is more important than the other. Both ways, we cannot do that. If we compromise on the privacy, it will compromise on the democratic credentials, right? It will be total. So what should be done? So naturally, we get this thing that we need to have an oversight agency. So that should be there. We need a data protection law. We need a data protection law. We can say that we need something to do with surveillance, so law which regulates surveillance, and we need more transparency in this regard. So these are certain things that can be looked over here. In fact, this article itself is saying is that the Supreme Court can also take a proactive role in dealing with this thing by accommodating. It can pass an order looking into the international best practices. In fact, you can just type international best practices. Okay, so let's move forward. The many ways of helping Sri Lanka. I'm not doing this. The age of hyperlapse consumerism. No. Speed kills. This is obviously important. I have posted this on my Instagram. This is yours also, right? So our Instagram page, IASPrimers. So we have all the facts. When we are writing an answer on this, we can go back to the page and we can refer this. Ongoing political crisis in Iraq. An explainer on that. Yeah. So this is the national news. Congress president. This is with reference to the Indian National Congress. Congress president will be elected through a fair process, right? Statement coming from this thing. China claims on Arunachal Pradesh outrageous. I mean, obviously we all know it is outrageous, but who's saying it, and that is important. We don't have to read this much, right? German envoy Philipp Ackermann. It's with reference to him, so naturally we are having support of the Western democracies, particularly this is coming from Germany, Western Europe. Whatever Germany does, Western Europe does the same thing. So we seem to have a support on this regard. A reason I'm not doing it is basically same thing, Iran, what is happening in Russia, what is happening in China, all those things. The LSE issue that took place. Chennai airport becomes the busiest in the country, which is the 5th busiest in the country. So can't they say Delhi is the most, is the biggest, busiest in the country? Okay. So, yeah, so New Delhi is the busiest, right? So we have the order over here. Not, sometimes they ask this, arrange the following in a chronological order. Sometimes, not always. West UP turns hotspot of cattle disease. Which cattle disease? Lumpy skin disease. And here they are saying that we will be making an indigenous vaccine to be rolled out soon, right? So they are working on this, and this vaccine will be known as Lumpy Pro-Vac. So you see, because of this COVID also, our ability of making vaccines has actually become better over here, and more disease can be covered by vaccine coverage. Right, so lumpy skin disease, let's look at it. What do we need for this? We need to know basic details. Basically, first of all, is it a bacterial disease or it is a virus? It is caused by a virus. Right, also known as the neethling virus. What are the symptoms associated with natural lumpy skin? And it was first discovered in Zambia, formerly Northern Rhodesia. Huge haul of fake 2000 rupee notes, NCRB. fine. If you remember demonetization, people can keep making currencies. What is important now for us is this thing. I think, yeah, it's important for GS3, that is internal security. Right? We can prepare this way. Obviously, this is all about facts and figures. What we need is fake currency and its implications for our country, or its implication for internal security, its implication for macroeconomic stability of our country, fake currency and its implication on national security. Remind you, national security is not just internal security, right? It is not about stability, internal security. National security is a much broader construct. It includes anything. It includes even food security. So here we'll talk about internal security and economic security. So in this lines, we have to prepare this topic. Otherwise, the factors of not much use if we cannot use it in this context. China will convene key ruling party Congress on October 16th, right? So typical, I think from number of days you have seen this thing coming up. So let's see this. So it's supposed to be the most, in China we have a single party rule over there, and even Xi Jinping and all their important leaders are associated with this thing. Communist Party of China. So what we have been seeing in the recent times is that Xi Jinping, the president of the Chinese, so he has been able to accommodate more and more powers with himself over the years, making him the party's most powerful leader since Mao Zedong, and Mao Zedong was the founder of this party. One thing he did previously was he had rewritten the constitution to end the 10-year limit. 10-year limit followed by two of his predecessors. So two of his previous presidents, they had retired at the completion of the 10 years, but he is continuing only. He has removed that limit. Right, so that is one thing. Naturally, other thing is that this committee is about will be the leader of the Chinese. And if we look at Xi Jinping becoming more and more powerful, that is a cause of concern, because Xi Jinping is the person who's associated with the Belt and Road Initiative. He's associated with the debt trap policy. He's associated with the line of actual control dispute that we have since 2014, right? 2013 we can say. So since Modi's time we are seeing this issue taking place. So line of LSE dispute, land border dispute that we have aggravated during the Galwan crisis. Okay, then we have the Taiwan issue. So he is very, very aggressive, right? So Taiwan issue, South China Sea dispute. So all of this has actually aggravated during his tenure over here. So it's important to see what happens during this thing, because it talks about the fate of Xi Jinping. But you know what Xi Jinping has actually done? Obviously, other leaders will not allow this thing to take place. So Xi Jinping, what he did was, his juniors got him arrested. Whosoever he felt was his competition, he got them arrested under one charge or the other. Can you please look at the Solomon Islands? Where is it located on the atlas? So yeah, so please look at the Solomon Islands. Okay. Now moving on to the business section quickly. I think we're not much over here. Sensex rebounds, surges 2.7%, spurred by bank and tech stocks. Basically, yesterday we talked about the Fed hike. Right? So US Federal Bank had increased their interest rate. So whenever they do this, it is expected that money will go outside of India back to their home country. It is expected. So naturally, it was expected that the stock market will fall, but the banking sector and the technology stocks, right? So they were able to uplift the Sensex. Rupee gains 39 paisa on FDI inflows, dip in oil price, right? So some days back only we talked about 44,000 worth of crores, 44,000 crores have come back into the Indian country. You know, US economy is not in a very good shape. While the US Federal Bank is increasing the rate, there was some data about 10% inflation rate. What is inflation in the country? About 7 to 8%, right? So this was very, very steep. So that was the reason. But then their economy is not doing well, so might as well invest in India. Okay, back to this sports section, right? So we're going to have a new match, cricket match. Serena turns on the heat. Fine. Okay, so this is it. So this basically concludes our DNA. So thank you for streaming on our channel IASPrimers with me, Shubhashish.